Shalom, everybody. This week's parasha is Parashat Matot, the tribes. It's found in the book of Numbers, chapter 30, verse 3, through chapter 36, verse 13. In this week's parasha, we find many interesting concepts. I will really focus only on two in this video. The one topic will be the topic of vows and oaths, and the other topic is the topic of wars and the killing of innocents in warfare. The topic of vows and oaths is a concept that is quite relevant to the religious world, not only to the Jewish people, but also non-Jewish religious groups. It's tied to the concept that in the Torah, the Almighty forbade the people of Israel from adding to or removing from the commandments given to Moses. This is related to the concept that the commandments that God gave to Israel through Moses are everlasting commandments to be kept in all their generations as an everlasting covenant. However, as anyone knows, circumstances change in life. Certain commandments, while very relevant to the broader population, may not be so applicable to people in unique circumstances. Laws are not given for paraplegics, for example. There are no laws concerning whether or not a intersex or hermaphrodite person is supposed to marry. And of course, aside from the few verses that many people oversimplify as being verses regarding prohibitions on gay people, there really are, even assuming that those two verses mean what people assume, there are no other verses about how people who are not attracted or aroused romantically or sexually to the opposite sex, how they're supposed to live. There are no laws on these things. So God gave everlasting commandments in the Torah, but some people are in situations that you have questions about what to do. God provided a legislative system. We call it the Beit Din HaGadol, the Great Sanhedrin, which would legislate how the laws that God gave to the people of Israel, how they should apply in unique situations in which the Torah, the law of Moses, did not go into detail. So instead of having everybody just doing whatever is right in their own eyes, our nation is unified in a way that allows us to have a systematic way in which we fulfill the commandments of God. Now let's say, though, that the Great Sanhedrin, the Beit Din HaGadol, had not yet legislated regarding a particular matter, because scenarios are quite literally infinite, potentially. So the individual, it's upon himself to do until the Great Sanhedrin, until the Supreme Court of Israel legislates regarding a matter. It is incumbent upon the individual to understand from the Torah and derive from his own intellect what he should do in the meantime. And yes, you can rely upon a rabbi to decide for you in the meantime, but let's say you don't have access to that rabbi or haven't found someone you trust yet. What you can do is you can take upon yourself voluntarily a vow or an oath to restrict yourself from doing something X, Y, or Z, something which otherwise would be permitted, but in your scenario, it may not be the smartest decision. So that, although God did not directly command regarding that matter, since you have bound yourself with a vow or an oath, it now becomes a commandment from God for you to live up to the word that you declared that you bound yourself to. So this is kind of like an extension of the law of Moses, an extension of the command of God through your own intellect. And this is really kind of the same concept as the authority that the Almighty gave to the Great Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of Israel, over the entire nation. Only this is on a more individualized level. And lastly, with regard to warfare and the deaths or killings of the innocent, this is one of the most controversial topics in the entire Bible. I would say, number one, that people who take issue with the particular passages that talk about killing of children or men, wholesale killing of an entire community, uh, some of the things you should keep in mind is, one, if you are going to disregard or just not believe in the Bible because of these passages, it's kind of circular reasoning. You're going to use these verses to hate God or not believe in God, yet it's on the assumption that these verses actually happened. You can actually believe in God without believing in these verses. You know, you could believe that there is a God without even believing in the Bible. Plenty of people do. But if you're going to actually say that the people of Israel are evil because they did XYZ, but then out of the other side of your mouth say that the Bible can't be trusted and these things didn't really happen, well, you need to decide, did these things happen or not? If they happened, if the narrative is trustworthy, then these things happened, one, under a prophet, an explicit prophet. This was not a disputed prophet according to the narrative. This was a prophet who brought the people of Israel through unbelievable circumstances and exhibited divine providence left, right, and center. There were freaking seas parted. Well, not seas. You had the Sea of Reeds, and then you also had the Jordan. But these were not regular circumstances. So this is not necessarily a license to every people on earth to go about and do these things. In fact, in codified Jewish law, you're not allowed to do these things without a Great Sanhedrin, and you need also a prophet, unless it's a war of defense. And also very applicable to even modern societies, and I would say every community and nation on earth. There are scenarios, unfortunately, where you have to decide between 3 people dying or 10 people dying, between 5,000 people dying or 100 people dying. And if you know for sure, if you have no doubts that not giving up the lives of this group here in order to ensure that a much larger number of innocent people will survive, then you're going to be guilty of the deaths of them all. And these sorts of decisions are made basically by every single government and army on earth. So look forward to your comments. I will do my best to engage, share your ideas, anything you'd like to add, and like, share, and subscribe. Shalom uvracha, Shabbat Shalom.